Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the ELSI discussion forum. So just a quick housekeeping note. So we will have a presentation followed by QA, and this session is being recorded. So I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Susanna Rose. She is Associate Professor at the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and she also serves as the Executive Director of the Advanced Center and the Vice Chair of AI Technology Committee. Dr. Rose is a leading ethicist specializing in the section of patient experience and AI ethics. So today she will be presenting Pragmatic and Nimble AI governance in healthcare. Dr. Rose, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Shashin. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. So I'm a Teams user, so I'm going to try to share my screen in the most appropriate ways here. Let's see. Here we go. Let's see here. We're going to go to this one. Great. Now, is this sharing in an odd way, or is it?
We're seeing your presenter mode.
I know. Okay, let's see if we can do it the other way around. I'm going to switch sides then. Let's see here. Sorry, we just tried this out, but let's see how we can do it. Great, we're gonna move this over here. Okay, now we should be good. Can you guys see okay?
Yeah, I can see both screens.
Again?
No, I see your screen and then the presentation slides. I think it should be fine.
Oh, okay. Are you
Yeah.
guys, is it okay this way?
It's just I don't know if just me, the presentation slide is a little small.
Yeah, it is acting weird. Sorry, guys. This is let's
Oh,
see if we can get it to,
just a second ago it was good. Yeah.
so yeah, it's trying to share my second screen here. Is this okay?
I see your screen and then the slide screen side by side, but the original screen was not full.
Okay, let's see how it works.
Yeah, right before we started, I don't know if you remember whatever setting that was, but that
That's
was
what I'm doing
perfect.
again.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like confused. I'm like, okay, let's see here. Let's try it this way. Let's try it this way.
Yeah,
Is that
we're
better?
all good. We're all good. Perfect.
Cool. Yep. It's flipping between Teams and Zoom, I'm sure. Okay, so good to see you guys. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to talk with you guys today. So, one of the things I'm going to focus on is really a focus on practical artificial intelligence governance within a primary healthcare system here at VUMC. So I want to start out with an idea that, maybe contrary to what a lot of people think in terms of governance, the way I see governance is that it is an intentional and strategic accelerator for progress and innovation. So some people sort of put them against each other, that governance is to stop things or slow things down, and innovation is to speed things up. The way I see it is that these need to work together simultaneously in order to drive innovation, but also ensure that we're doing things in the most ethically appropriate ways. And I want to frame this up, just to make sure we're all level set. I know most people on this call probably have a very good awareness of what's happening sort of nationally and at the state level, but just to kind of put a little framework around what I think about in terms of AI governance at the institution level, I always try to get a framing of what's happening nationally and at the state level. So, and nationally, we're seeing a movement towards exploring how artificial intelligence can actually be used and actually using artificial intelligence and removing barriers. We have more of a focus now on deregulation and interoperability, as opposed to previously more focus on transparency and bias detection. We have a more focus on the private sector to find solutions. And we're also shifting a lot of, lead with artificial intelligence to CMMS, to the FDA, also into the states, and increasingly with the FDA and NIST. At the state level, this is courtesy, and I have the link here to the Hastings Center, where they're tracking some state level laws and legislations related to artificial intelligence. And to drill down in just a few of them, just in the last, really in the last like 6 months or so, we're seeing influx of state laws that are being passed, particularly related to AI chatbots, but also in terms of other uses. So we have California, Utah, New York, Nevada, and Maine, just to name a few. And Nevada, Utah, and New York are specifically addressing the use of mental health chatbots. Illinois is prohibiting AI from direct interaction with patients or making recommendations and plans without an explicit clinician review. California is focusing a little bit more on disclosure, prevention of harm, particularly to minors. And this new one that just went into effect of Utah is authorizing a pilot program to allow an AI system, which is a proprietary tool, to autonomously evaluate and review prescriptions for chronic conditions, such as diabetes, hypertension, and some mental health issues, without direct real-time human involvement. So it's a little bit misleading in the sense that they are doing about 250 of the first automated prescription renewals are being evaluated by the clinician. But then after that, the idea is that it would be autonomous and enhance access to renewals for these types of medications. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Vanderbilt University Medical Center approach. In light of things changing at the federal level and at the state levels, this has really left a lot of organizations to figure it out themselves and to work together to find out how we can work the best way possible to maximize AI's potential, but also reduce the risks. So why do we need artificial intelligence governance? I think, most of us here likely can answer that pretty directly, but to make sure we're all on the same page. AI is super exciting, but it can be beneficial, but it can also be potentially dangerous. And as many of us, know as ethicists and others in this field, is that it may not work as well for certain populations over others. So we have to make sure that we're assessing, which data sets are being used, who is part of the training set, and also continuous monitoring for various AI tools. We also need to think about data security and privacy, which is, a major concern for different types of artificial intelligence tools that use different types of data sources in particular. We also need to think about surveillance. This is something that I have been thinking about for a while, not just surveillance of patients, but also of employees within healthcare systems, and the increased reliance on monitoring phone conversations, video monitoring, and other sources of data. And we also, in ethics, we also need to think about transparency. Not only transparency in terms of how models work, how they were trained, but also transparency in terms of end users. So to drill this down, I like to get right down to the practical. When I was previously at the Cleveland Clinic, where I started a similar process of AI governance with some fantastic partners there. And when I came here to Vanderbilt University Medical Center about a little over 2 years ago, I did a series of listening sessions across the organization. And some of and why this is important is that every single organization does not necessarily have the same needs, the same ambitions, or the same culture. And so taking one organization's governance process and just plopping it down into another would probably not be appropriate. And it would probably end in less enthusiastic success. So in my listening sessions, I talked to folks about their concerns around AI-associated risks, but also the opportunities for innovation. People didn't know where to go for help or of ideas or where to go in the organization. At the time I came here, large language models were actually not permitted to be used at VUMC, and this was perceived to potentially stymie innovation. There was not one single process for AI reviews, so they would get stuck, no clear decision-making process. And one organization component wasn't necessarily communicating with the other. And this really contributed to confusion about how all the subsystems work together. There was also no single source of truth about what AI was currently being used in the organization. There was inconsistent alignment with ethical principles, and also unclear standards for AI testing. And lastly, we're still in this process, but we also want to start assessing the return on investment for AI technologies. So as a result, here within the organization, we can now use large language models and other AI if it's approved by AIT, and I'll explain what AIT is in a minute. And now there's one single process here. So all forms of artificial intelligence go through the similar process, all through AIT. It fosters communications and improves processes among all the organizationally relevant systems. And we actually handhold some people to make sure that they're going through the right processes through the system. We also have created an inventory that includes all models and tools used in clinical care, operations, and research. And every new model is assessed for alignment with ethics, policies, and regulations. And we're also developing a model process for model monitoring that assesses model drift for all people and assesses the risks of harms. And we are, as I mentioned, we're in the process of determining a return on investment assessment, mainly because we're seeing so many models and products that are using artificial intelligence that promise to do a lot of different things. And even if there's evidence for those, we need to start thinking about how the organization can prioritize those solutions. So to remind all of us, why we would need governance of AI at the organizational level, we have issues related to patient safety. So while some of these solutions may try to reduce safety considerations, we need to carefully assess them to determine whether they actually are improving patient safety, but also reducing the risk that they actually might create problems. We want to make sure that the models are working at performance at scale and working for all people. We also want to reduce that risk of data privacy. So we want to make sure that HIPAA violations, breaches, and cyber threats are contained and prevented in the first place. The risk is also a lack of transparency. So we have black box decision making, but also in terms of the processes that are used within the current system. So it might not be technically black box, but we might not actually know the data or the use cases or the workflows for how that might work within different clinical environments. Automation bias is something that is really interesting and is potentially a big concern. So we see this in the literature, and we're seeing this increasingly within organizations, that there might be an over-reliance on AI recommendations, largely because a lot of these recommendations might not be fully transparent, what decisions have to be made, but also in terms of the time limitations that people have in order to review these outputs. Additionally, humans are not really all that good at catching errors. We might be really good at catching one kind of error or maybe two kinds of errors, but when you're looking at how a human in the loop process can reduce automation bias, this is not something our workforce is currently trained for. We also have a significant legal uncertainty. As many have reported in the literature, there's concerns about liability, compliance, and governance gaps that at least we can try to pay attention to and align that to the AI governance process within the organization. So our top opportunities, I talked about the risks there before, and now I'm going to talk about the top opportunities. So we can, potentially foster connections within a process of earlier detection to actually reduce the risks of harm. We can have decision augmentation. So instead of having the risk of automation bias and people, just kind of blindly or, mindlessly going through and clicking yes, we can think about in human-centered design, integrating both AI and human workflows to make them both better. Especially with ambient scribe technologies, there's a lot of potential promise, not a lot of evidence yet, but a lot of potential promise for these technologies to reduce burnout and burnout reduction. We also can start to think about operational efficiencies and resource allocation. So, complex cost data, access, throughput. My role at the Cleveland Clinic, I was the associate chief for patient experience. And so really gaining a significant understanding about how each of the components of a healthcare system can really put up barriers or actually work together to enhance access and treatment. We also, of course, are thinking about the opportunities for precision medicine and individualized treatment. But this can only be done well if we have the structures in place in order to magnetize the assets that we do have in order to enhance precision medicine, not detract from it. And also, we can expand access. So these are other opportunities in terms of, patients are often not getting their care, getting healthcare actually within hospital systems anymore. I've been in healthcare for over 30 years, so I remember this whole transition, and we're seeing this even more so. That patients are often, accessing care or thinking about medical issues long before, or they never have been in the hospital system. So reaching people where they are. So we just hot off the press, completed a survey with our local community of patients as part of an advisory group here at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Most patients said that they would feel most comfortable with an abundance of communication around the use of artificial intelligence in their care. I won't go through all the details here, but they're very interested in what's happening, and they're particularly more interested if it's specifically related to their diagnosis or treatment decisions. And related to this, a lot of patients might say that they want to have more information, but I'm putting two sources here of a paper I wrote, and also I think it just got released last week, I think, was the New York City Bar on a podcast with Dr. Alex London from Carnegie Mellon University, who's also a fantastic expert in AI and ethics. We talk about sort of how and what to do in terms of communication to patients in a structured artificial intelligence governance system within healthcare organizations. So what do we do here at VUMC? So our AI governance process, we envision that we have a future of artificial intelligence that's embedded into the healthcare system. So really a learning healthcare system that optimizes patient outcomes, improves patient and clinician experience, and maximizes operational efficiency. However, we want to do this in a way that's following a fair, transparent, and nimble process of AI development, review, use, and monitoring. And you're going to probably, catch on in the sense that this title that I have, for this talk was focused on Nimble. We really do not want to have unnecessarily slow things down. So we're trying to develop processes that allow for quick and targeted approval and review and approval processes. So we have a policy and standard operating procedure that is put in place. It went into place into about a little over a year ago, where we set out very specific definitions. We set out acceptable use of artificial intelligence, and we also set out parameters of unacceptable use. Requirements are that all AI has to go through the AIT committee. They have to define the use and restrictions. And also, we have to have a security review component, and that means privacy, risk management, and also cybersecurity. So in terms of our policy and procedure, we make sure that VUMC is utilizing artificial intelligence that aligns to the organizational values. Obviously, also respects legal and regulatory requirements, safeguards data privacy and security, and follows those ethical principles, and promoting transparency and accountability. Importantly, in terms of process, it's communicated to the entire organization that the AIT process is one single stream. Everybody comes to our subcommittee and we're designated as the authority responsible for reviewing and approving AI technologies here at the organization. We also establish the requirements and responsibilities for various other AI uses, and also unacceptable uses. So this creates an ability to not just codify things within a policy that is very static, and sometimes it's very hard to change policies at most organizations. But what we are trying to do is make sure that this is nimble. So when new technologies do come open, get rolled out across the country or the world, we don't have to go back and revise our policy and SOP. We've given sort of transactional as a decision-making authority to our governance process. So who's involved? Here are some key roles in terms of our Artificial Intelligence Technology Governance Committee. I chair the committee. We have representatives from the IRB, from IT. Here at the organization, we have a separation between IT and health IT. So IT are the folks that really sort of make sure that the operational structures are in place and we have contracting and all the things. And then health IT is related to any kind of technology that's used in the clinical care setting. Cybersecurity, we have a physician, a nurse, we have AI researchers and biostatisticians, privacy experts, risk management experts, legal, procurement. The reason why procurement is in here is that we have found organizationally that we want to make sure that all of us are aligned in terms of what's required for somebody to purchase something or to accrue a new technology. So we've put in organizational connections, so that way we're all aligned on the correct process, and that way it avoids people from getting frustrated. They go to this person and they say yes, you have to do this, and then that person. We want to make sure that we're trying to provide a good customer service to people who really want to use artificial intelligence technologies. We also add new members strategically because new stuff might come up and we might need new expertise. And the AIT committee reports directly to executive administration. So how? So artificial intelligence, a lot of people just think it's the deployment or but as all of us know here, given our expertise, artificial intelligence and governance need to go through each of the phases of model development. Even at the very first use case, conceptualization, the development itself, the pilot and validation, the production release, and then model management and monitoring. And so I'll talk a little bit more about the final two stages here, particularly in the last circle. I'll be giving you a little bit more information on that. But right now, this is our sort of very rough sketch of our process. So we have a direct submission. People can come directly to us using an internal URL. They can also get referred from IT, from cybersecurity, or the IRB. And they complete a very brief intake question for us. And the reason for this intake sort of set is it's like maybe 10 questions, is to just make sure that this actually, in fact, uses artificial intelligence. You might be surprised at how many people don't know. And so we just get basic information, so we don't put them through a whole process. It's completely unnecessary. So we do a very quick and nimble sort of initial phase. And then if it's in the right place, then we actually go on to phase two. Phase two has a much more in-depth set of questions, and I'll go over some of those domains. And also, it gets assigned to an expert on the AIT review committee that does a deeper dive. And then this gets discussed during our phase three, which is our subcommittee reviews. And then it either gets approved and a memo is sent out for the next steps, and we facilitate warm handoffs to places like cybersecurity or legal or whatever the case might be. Or if it's not approved, we provide that rationale and offer support and education. And I think what's important is that support and education are a central component to our entire process. I think if you just put a process down and you just say, you have to do this, people will work around things. They will not, they won't necessarily do the things that they're intended to do. So we really want to try to facilitate a very positive customer service orientation to make sure that, people know that we exist, that we can help facilitate and answer questions. Additionally, as part of this Nimble process and customer service, we've implemented a new FastPass process, particularly for submissions that are, sort of retrospective validation studies that have no connection with, patient care or operational uses. This is something, to try to make sure that we're focusing on the higher risk items that come across our desk and not on the very low risk things. We work extremely closely with the IRB in terms of facilitating this process, and the IRB has been just amazing partners with us. So what sort of stuff do we do? I'm sure most of you can probably have a pretty good idea, more than almost anybody else in the world, about what we might be reviewing. But one of the things we do is assess the overall risk of the tool, and also the risk mitigation plan. One thing I want to emphasize here is that NIST and others have really focused on risk mitigation as a primary goal for artificial intelligence governance. And absolutely, I think that that's important. However, we also in this process here at VUMC, we also want to make sure that we are balancing the risk with the possibility for benefits. So if we were only focused on risk mitigation and risk reduction, frankly, we probably wouldn't deploy anything. So it's always that balance and ethics in terms of, really an assessment of the risk, the potential for risk and the potential for benefits, and marrying those things up. But also a careful consideration for the risk mitigation plan. So while many of these tools have inherent risks in them, it is all about the workflow, the training, and the process of where these artificial intelligence tools are being used and the people around them and how they've planned this out. So this is a careful consideration. We're not just assessing the actual tool, but we're also assessing the whole process. We also want to consider privacy protections and referral to a privacy office if needed. Again, I mentioned close relationships with cybersecurity. We have a really close connection with our cybersecurity team that are not only thought partners for us in terms of how to evaluate these technologies, but also ensure alignment within our organization as to various types of risks and risk mitigation strategies. Another one is accountability. And this one I learned from, I think I was probably one of the first in AI governance so long ago at Cleveland Clinic. My team over there, gosh, it's been like 6 years ago that we did this. One of the things we learned really early on is that we would have various models, but person might put them into place, they might leave the organization, and there's really no sense of accountability. And so one of the things we learned very quickly is that we not only need a person, but we need a process, and ensuring that somebody is responsible for this tool through its entire life cycle, including sunsetting. So a lot of attention is paid to approval processes, in my opinion, at least from what I have been talking to folks across the country, is there's less of a focus on sunsetting tools that are either not being used anymore or have been deemed not helpful. We also, I talked to you guys in the very beginning about the regulatory and compliance standards. This is a very complicated process, and so we want to make sure that the standards that we have are being met. And those might not be specific only to artificial intelligence. They may be related to many other sort of regulatory and compliance standards. We also conduct an ethics review. One example of an ethics review component is whether patients should be notified, or if informed consent proactively should be given. This is something that we think about, and it's not just participants and patients. This could also include employees. So for example, if there's a tool that is, recording phone conversations, for example, we have to consider carefully about who should be notified that they're being recorded, which most people today assume this, but then also about what kind of analytics are going to be used, including artificial intelligence, to analyze those data. We also want to make sure that the tool has a plan for assessment for effectiveness for all people for which it might be used. Another one that often slips through the cracks is intellectual property. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's not, patient information, it's not research, not research data, therefore it's not protected. But as all of us know, ideas and inventions and things like this are also important for organizations to protect. And so we're finding that we also need to ensure that people's education on that topic is expanded. We also do a third-party risk assessment, liability evaluation, and also conflicts of interest. So for these last three, we don't necessarily do these within our own umbrella. We would refer these out. But for example, for conflicts of interest, we do assess whether a person who is submitting something to our process, whether they have an investment in the company or some other conflict of interest. We don't manage that ourselves, but we do assess whether that exists or not. So our metrics so far, so we have approved 287 submissions in about a year, a little over a year. Our goal is to complete each review within 3 weeks, and our current review time is 15 days. So we're doing a pretty good job in terms of our throughput and really not trying to hold things back. Now, remember, there are some tail ends to this. So there are some very complicated submissions that we really have to do a lot of in-depth assessment, which are, very much longer than 15 days. But on average, it's our 15-day turnaround process. As you can see, we've seen an uptick, in terms of, we had sort of pre-data where before we deployed the policy, so we were just collecting information. But you can see after the policy deployment in January 2025, we see a substantial increase to the review committee. One thing that's interesting is that a lot of focus across the country is on clinical usage of artificial intelligence and governance. But one of the things we have found is that clinical is one of the smaller utilized categories, where we have research as 42%, and what we call clinical operations, which is about 45% of submissions. So clinical operations, I probably should rename this a little bit, but it's really like everything else that's not research and clinical. So that could include revenue cycle management, HR, productivity tools, and various other products that incorporate artificial intelligence. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about algorithm vigilance, which is that sort of last ring that I promised you I would discuss. So algorithm vigilance is part of a Vanderbilt algorithm vigilance monitoring operation system, or what we call VAMOS. And it's a novel socio-technical system of processing and providing an analytical dashboard for our health information viewpoints within the organization. So this falls underneath, this system falls underneath our Artificial Intelligence Technology Committee, which I lead, and it provides organizational governance and oversight. It captures reporting adverse events. It provides team-based monitoring and can respond to critical issues that come up with various models. So for example, you can set the parameters for various models within the organization, and this can be clinical or non-clinical, by the way. I'm going to present sort of clinical stuff, but we have a pretty broad viewpoint here within the organization of AI usage, of use and monitoring. So we want to set the standards so we can monitor the model post-deployment. We can select different types of metrics, such as accuracy or precision, model drift, responsiveness, and fairness and equity. We can also think about just-in-time feedback loops, right? So if a model is moving into a dangerous direction, we need to make sure that we tell the clinical teams, but also our IT teams, to make sure that we have decision-making process appropriate to this model. And we want to take appropriate actions. So we want to investigate the cause of what's going on with the model. We want to correct and update the model if we need to. We need to notify the clinical teams, and we may even need to pause the algorithm use until we can fix it. So here's a mock-up of the platform. So VAMOS is an open source consortium. I can tell you a little bit more about it if people have questions, but you can see here where you basically have a list of all the models that are in your organization within the left side. So on your side, it would be Cornelius, surgical scheduling, postpartum hemorrhage. So these are various models that are being used within the clinical environment. And then you can click on it to expand it to provide you more granular details about the model performance. So you can see here, we can look at it across time. We can look at certain process properties. We can look at specific outcomes, may not be related directly to the model itself, but we also might want to match up whether it's actually reducing, postpartum hemorrhage or improving surgical scheduling. So this can be in terms of the outcome and impact. And we also want to consider whether it's being equally, in terms of model drift, for example, if it's drifting for other populations more than others. So here's a couple of publications that we've had on this topic. This term, I believe, was coined by Dr. Peter Imby, the term algorithm vigilance, but we're also publishing a series of papers on the development of this system. Hold on. Okay, there we go. We also have early adopters and engaged partners. So here's just to name a few. And this is something that could be very helpful across organizations across the country, because if to a certain level, if we can share information, maybe not granular information, but sort of metadata and others, then we can actually start to understand how these models are being, how they're performing, or how the tools are performing across organizations. And all of us using and kind of working on a tool together might really provide some, huge benefits in terms of learning from other organizations, learning how to prevent certain types of harms, but also importantly, really working together to ensure that we have the right mitigation strategies. So aligned with this, but it's a completely different organization, as a organization nonprofit called Train, which is the Trustworthy and Responsible AI Network. We're really a sort of a counterpart to, not officially, but we work very closely with CHAI. So our mission with Train is we have, oh gosh, I don't even know anymore, maybe over 100 healthcare organizations across the United States. But also incorporate industry and payers and many other partners to really focus on a mission of fostering technology-enabled partnership across our entities. Really thinking about ways that we can improve governance standards, return on investment assessments, and kind of share informally and formally information across organizations. In the sense that we don't have very specific regulations, we're trying to work together to ensure that we are benchmarking ourselves, that we are not just designing these things in isolation, that we're working across sectors in order to ensure that responsible AI is being used. And if anybody's interested, you can, let me know in terms of your interest. Happy to have folks join. Another aspect that's critical for monitoring, a lot of people think about, is large language models. And there's been a lot of questions about how can we monitor large language models. So I haven't talked a lot about my specific research, but I'll mention it here in terms of developing large language monitoring is really a critical feature for ongoing artificial intelligence deployment, monitoring, and assessment and governance. So this is part of a $7.3 million ARPA-H grant with my co-PI, Dr. Jaejun Yun, to detect hallucinations, omissions, and misaligned values to ensure safety and empathy with AI-generated responses. So what we're developing is really real-time and scalable feedback to assess whether a chatbot's doing a bad thing, whether it's doing good things, whether it's doing appropriate things, but also utilizing various other large language model utilization beyond chatbot technologies. So I also want to highlight that folks can email me if they're interested in joining Advance. So Advance is our VUMC AI sort of center. And you can also, I think my email is on the first part of my slide, so you can feel free to email me. But we do, we have symposiums, we do online educational events. We're also open for collaboration for across organizations and across the United States for developing artificial intelligence research and healthcare. And I want to thank Dr. Laura Novak, Dr. Brad Mullen, and Dr. Peter Emby, who are my co-leaders of this organization. So conclusion, and then we can have some questions. Oh, perfect. Great. 20 minutes for questions. So we've developed a robust AI governance process, and many organizations across the country have reached out to us to help potentially serve as a model for their systems. However, we also hope to learn, and we do learn from other systems for our systematic improvement of our system. Again, we do focus on nimble customer service, but also balancing that with rigor. And we also have, within our organization, underwent a very rigorous internal quality review about our own process and received very positive feedback in terms of what we're doing within the organization. So this is something I'm very proud of, and I hope we can also help other organizations. So I'll take questions.
Thanks a lot, Susanna, for the wonderful presentation. I saw some question already in the chat. So the first one is, do you have a definition for the Nimble that you use, or is it more aspiration?
That's a great question. I think it is more aspirational. The way I see Nimble is that this is sparking me to, government, AI governance is so new. The way I think of it is that it's very customer service driven, and that we can respond to people's questions and needs, but also within the organization. So if there's something strategic that needs to be done, we can quickly mobilize what our process is and how we can address those questions. So, usually governance is not sort of connected with nimble, fast process. On the one hand, we don't want to be too fast in order to miss things and put things through that are, not good to be put through. But on the other hand, we also don't want to hold back innovation that needs to be deployed.
Great. Another question is, does vamosci.org load for everyone? So the question, I think, is whether people outside the VU can have
Oh,
access.
yes, it should be able to load.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So Vamos AI is a nonprofit that is a different nonprofit. So it's an open source. So this should be it's something that we've developed here at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, but it's also something that others can use as well.
Mm. Yeah, I have a question, like based on your experience, when AI supported decision goes wrong, like how and who should take responsibility between clinician, institution, or vendor?
I'm sorry. What? I
So
was looking at
if yeah,
the chat. Sorry.
oh, okay, okay. No, no,
What
my
was left?
question, my question is, if AI supported decision goes wrong, how the responsibility be shared between clinician, institution, and vendor?
Yeah, it depends on what you mean. Like if you're asking legally,
Uh-huh.
I can't respond to that.
Uh-huh.
But currently, the way the structure is going is that the clinicians or the organizations hold the responsibility
Uh-huh.
generally for the tools that they have been using. So that makes it, that they have contracted for. Now, this may change over
Right.
time, particularly
Right.
as we see more autonomous models and decision making.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we also need to consider that that might not change fast enough. So this is one of the reasons and big motivations for systems like Vamos, because currently, at least to my knowledge, most organizations do not know what is actually happening at any level, really, with many of their tools.
Mm-hmm.
The people that put together or deploy the tools might be monitoring them, but it's not necessarily aligned with organizational goals. It may be very idiosyncratic. And also certain types of outcomes might
Mm-hmm.
not be assessed, particularly if they're focused really on narrow outcomes for their clinical population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm asking this question because there are more and more agent-based tools that's almost running automatically, right? So
Right,
it's very
exactly.
hard to
Yeah, is it
monitor
is
every
it
single
really?
detail.
Yeah, yeah. Is it really a human, right, that's making
Yeah,
the decisions, or if it's
or
um,
the agent is making a decision for us.
yeah. So, I'll put it in the chat if I can focus on different things, but
Yeah.
Professor Glenn Cohen has a fantastic article on essentially how clinicians, what role do we want clinicians to be in? Are they
Mhm.
essentially just sort of, autonomous workers, or, do they have autonomy, or are they just clicking the button to sort of, you know, uh, ensure that the artificial intelligence is working properly? So we
Right.
have some strategic decisions
Mhm.
to make
Mhm.
within
Mhm.
organizations about
Mhm.
how do we ideally want to use these tools. We do not need to be at the beck and call of them.
Makes sense. Dr. Yang?
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I wondered about how you've been considering disclosure to patients about use of algorithms in their care and issues of consent.
Yeah. So in the paper I put up, and Jiajin, you might be able to find that paper in the link.
Mhm.
If you can put it in the chat, that would be great. And
Yeah.
also the New York City Bar Association podcast, because we go through a lot of details on that.
Mhm.
So, there really are currently no standards for this. Investigational uses are a completely different situation. But right now, we really have to think about several different factors, in my opinion, about how and when we should talk to patients. First of all, is it something that is, an artificial intelligence that's changing the standards of practice? I think pretty quickly we're going to see artificial intelligence start to recommend things that are not necessarily the current standard. And so that's going to be particularly important as we think about communication to patients. Additionally, if it's something patient facing, I think in that case, it's also really critical to tell patients that they're engaging with an artificial intelligence or they're using an artificial intelligence tool. Especially with large language models or generative AI, patients can mistake talking to a person. We certainly don't want to, mislead people. Another aspect is, how autonomous is the model, right? Even when I wrote that paper, it was like a year ago, people were telling me all over the place that, autonomous models will never be put into place in healthcare. And we already have autonomous models that are being deployed, particularly like in pathology, for example. Some of my pathology friends are like, we literally haven't, counted red cells in a very long time, right? So, so we have to be careful about, those autonomous, not that we shouldn't use them necessarily, but we need to be, I think, transparent with patients in the sense that if that's not their expectation, then we really need to make sure that we are communicating to them appropriately if it's something that's deviating from their reasonable expectations. I think also critically important is that we also don't want to burden patients. So a lot of times I did a lot of work in conflicts of interest before, and there's fantastic research that by disclosing everything does not absolve the person that has the conflict of interest from doing things that are not good, right? However, there's this worry I have about disclosure that it does seem to offload a lot of the moral responsibility onto the person who's getting the disclosure. So the idea is you disclose, then they can decide whether they're going to use it or trust you or whatever the case might be, right? And so I think that that's really important for us to very carefully consider whether this is something that is a burden to people or is it actually something that would be helpful to them. I think we also have to think about in terms of, at my previous organization and here, for some patients, we might have many models currently running, right? So it's not even the burden of one disclosure, but it's also potentially the burden of 10 disclosures. Are we going to literally go and talk to patients' family members in ICUs and tell them about sepsis risk models and things like this? I think that's a critical decision that we have to make in terms of, the constellation of AI. And lastly, I think that the important thing is also related to whether people even have a choice, right? So, if it's a sepsis model that's running in the background, does a person have a choice that can they pull themselves out of being, the AI model being used on them? I think these are all really careful considerations that we have. This being said, over and over, I also co-lead with Dr. Lori Novak and two patients here at VUMC. We have an AI patient family advisory group. And so, in addition to the survey results I talked to you about and also published literature, people are really interested in this stuff. We have a bifurcation of a lot of people very concerned and a lot of people really enthusiastic about the use of AI, as you guys might expect. So the empirical work says we have a lot of variability in terms of what information people want. And I think that we need to be sensitive that right now, I think a lot of people want a lot of information.
So Nicole and then Moni.
So much, Dr. Rose, for your presentation. I'm the CEO of a small business, Mind Moves. We do a lot of evaluation work, and we look at metrics like readability, interpretability, evidence support, making sure that models don't give medical advice or diagnosis. And then we kind of use a hybrid approach using both humans and machines to evaluate, and we let evaluation drive our product design. So my question is, within the medical domain, what is deemed acceptable? Like, it's never going to be 100% from a Gemini model. So, like, what is the tolerance that a patient is willing to accept these days?
From a patient or from the healthcare system perspective?
That's a great.
I think right now, or maybe both, maybe they should be the same. We are right now sort of, in my opinion, writing the rules for a lot of this, in terms of what standards of evidence should be there in order for something to be deployed. I'm seeing across the country, there's a lot of pressure for people to deploy things that do not have enough evidence. And I think that this is potentially a big concern, especially because, at least from what I've been told, and I would love to hear from you guys, to my knowledge, I think that we're the only, organization, and I think in the country, that requires all forms of AI to come through us. Without having such a strong policy, people just kind of are like, well, does it have to go through the clinical or the radiology? They find ways to, not necessarily purposefully, but they don't necessarily think that the rules need to apply. And so my worry is that we not only don't have necessarily having standards for evidence for deployment, we actually don't even, a lot of organizations don't even know what is being deployed, let alone what evidence there is, or if it's being monitored. So I think, as we move forward, if we're going to use these things in our patients' care, we have to protect our patients. We also have to not protect them too much that we're not doing the innovative things that can help them, right? So I think, your question's really great, Nicole, in the sense of like, where are we putting ourselves, within our organizations, and what do we even not know that is happening within a lot of healthcare organizations in the United States?
Moni?
Cheers. Thank you so much, Dr. Rose. I am very impressed with how you've been able to shift this narrative from turning AI governance into this, like, from being this like compliance bottleneck and making it into this innovation enabler. And so I'm actually curious and picking your brain on, there are so many places where there's this like gigantic gap between the high level ethical principles and the actual IT infrastructure. And I saw that you have personnel from both on the committee. I wonder if you could share a little bit more into that. How did you structurally bridge this, IRB and ethics boards with your CTO IT teams? I'm very curious. Thank you.
Oh, Moni, I love your question too. So, I'm a researcher, I'm a clinician, I'm a former, an executive. And one thing I didn't mention to you guys is I'm a social worker. So I was a social worker for a decade at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And so, us social workers, we think about systems, right? We often, people don't often know a lot about social work. So the way we think about things and problem solution is rarely one person or one solution. It's always about the systems level, right? And so I think that that's just how I think. And I'm also very enthusiastic to jump into messy problems. So I guess that's the ethicist in me as well, and the social worker. So, the way I think of it, and I have to give full, really credit to Cleveland Clinic for this as well. So, for example, I sat on the Conflicts of Interest and Innovation Management Committee there. And I think, conflicts of interest disclosures are not necessarily the highest on everybody's list. However, the leaders within that committee, it's been almost 15 years that they've been in existence, provided a service to the organization and provided a service to individuals. And that was what makes that part of the organization so effective within the Cleveland Clinic. And so I took that learning into what I'm doing here at VUMC. So not only are we protecting patients in the organization, but I think that the word is getting out that we can also help protect them. We can also connect them because we know now, like, what's going on in the entire organization. That information is really helpful to connect people, and also to sometimes really help them. Like, so, for example, somebody might submit something to our process, and we're like, oh, we've already approved X and can do the same thing. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I don't even have to wait a day, right? So, we try to make sure that we can address those things as quickly as possible. I also have to say, Moni, that those listening sessions that I mentioned to you guys, I think are critically important for any initiative. Leaders across the organization, and most organizations, are not necessarily enthusiastic about one more layer of bureaucracy, right? And so I think that building it from the stakeholders up, including patients, including family members, including the whole process, they helped us create the system that we have now. And so I'm going to pause there because I just get too excited about this one. I'm happy to talk to you more about it. My
Thank
research,
you.
my research is also like really closely connected with the practical aspects, which I think helps bring rigor and notice and legitimacy to it as well.
Thank you so much.
So I think there's one more question in the chat. So how do you see European regulation regarding AI and health?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love this question too. Sorry, guys, I get too excited. This is why I love having a lot of question and answer. So the EU regulations and also like WHO suggestions and others, it's really interesting because I present a lot and connect with my EU colleagues in particular. The EU is much more protectionist oriented in terms of their policies. That might be changing somewhat, but I think when I go and present our governance process, they think that the United States is way on the other side of things. Some European countries, from what I've been told from their experts, have maybe deployed one artificial intelligence tool in their entire country. Now there's a wide variety within the EU, and there's a wider variety of sort of adoption of the policies that the EU proposes, right? So I think we're going to see some really interesting innovations. I also think that recent international changes may be motivating some European countries and others to perhaps be more autonomous in their own artificial intelligence technology development, just beyond healthcare, but including healthcare as well.
Wonderful. Any last minute question?
Was wondering how your team considers FDA status, like FDA approval or clearance in determining whether a tool can be deployed locally.
It's one of the inputs. What I am not, looking at the FDA sort of standards for approval, we still want to usually have local validation before we're deploying something with FDA. Now, there's different types of FDA approvals. I'm talking about specifically sort of the medical device pathways. What I don't want to see within our organization is, it's just FDA approved, so therefore we can use it without having internally gone through the similar process. Now, when federal organizations have more, and the FDA is doing some fantastically innovative things right now. And so I have a feeling that they're going to be able to provide us some more guidance in the future.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks so much for Dr. Rose for this very encouraging and inspiring talk and discussion. So I think we'll conclude here and hopefully see you next session.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Take care.